to look at any more than one model, okay, when you're looking at this. Okay, so let's start. Okay, the first structure you need to know are the dendrites. The dendrites are these white structures that stick out. The white structures that stick out. Okay, the second structure is the cell body. The cell body, again, if you remember, looks like a cell, so it's the area inside the dendrites. It's this whole area, this whole thing here. That's the cell body. Okay, this plastic dome that sticks out at you, that's the nucleus. Okay, that's the nucleus. And then when you get up close, you're going to see inside the nucleus there's these purple little structures. You can see a little bit now, they're kind of dark, but when you look up close you'll see that's the nucleolus. They kind of look like raspberries. Okay, little purple structures on the inside, that's the nucleolus. Okay, scattered throughout the neuron, you see these little blue shapes. Most of them are here. And then there's some blue ones down the orange part here. The point is, who's talking? If you want to talk, go in the hall. Okay? Any of the blue that you see, those are Nissl bodies. So anything on this model that's blue, it has to be a Nissl body. There's nothing else on here that's blue. Okay, the next structure is the axon. We're going to move to this long part. The axon is this orange thing that goes down the middle. The axon is the long orange piece that goes down the middle. Okay, now, when you look inside the axon, you're going to see little structures that are this and this. When you look up close, you're going to see that they're red, and they have these little squiggles inside. Those are the mitochondria. So note that the mitochondria are red. Why is this so blue to me? Anyway, the mitochondria are red. Okay, then, over to the side here, you see what looks kind of like an oval-shaped cell. You can see the nucleus in the middle. This stands for the Schwann cell with the nucleus. This stands for the Schwann cell with the nucleus. Okay, then this beigey off-white stuff, remember the orange is the axon, that's outside the axon, that's the myelin sheath. That's the myelin sheath, it's on both sides. And then this is not done real well, but it still illustrates the point. We have these depressions in the myelin sheath. You can see it sinks in on both sides. That stands for the node of Ranvier. The depression stands for the node of Ranvier. And then if you cross out neurolemma, I don't like that one. Alright, that's all. And again, all the models are identical. Once you've looked at one, you don't need to look at the other. Okay, the next one is the spinal cord. This is what we're going to start in class tomorrow with the notes. So even looking at this today will help. Okay, first of all, let's get an idea exactly what you're looking at. What you see is a vertebra. Okay, that should look familiar. And inside is where the spinal cord is found. Now, the reason we're going to start like this is because you need to be able to tell what's anterior and posterior. If you remember, the body of the vertebra is always anterior, and the spinous process, which comes down your back, is always posterior. So if this is anterior and this is posterior, it makes sense that this part of the spinal cord is anterior and this side is posterior. So I'm going to make it bigger, or zoom in on the spinal cord part. Now this looks just like the picture in the lab book, and again, there's only one spinal cord model, so when you've seen this one, you've seen them all, you don't need to look twice. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this part of the spinal cord. You see that there's a darker area in the middle, and with a little bit of imagination, they describe it as being a capital letter H. Somebody said a butterfly, whatever works for you, but they describe it as a capital letter H. Okay, outside of the letter H, you can see that the area looks whitish. That area is called white matter. So white matter is the area outside of the H. The whole area outside of the H. That's the white matter. Now, the white matter is divided into areas. I always go for the easiest word. You can call the areas of the white matter funiculi, or singular is funiculus. I like the word column, so you do what you want. Okay, first we have lateral, anterior, and posterior columns. Well, we know that lateral means to the side, so the white matter on the side, the white matter on the side is the lateral column. Okay, so lateral column, lateral column. Okay, then anterior, we decided that this part, because here's the body, okay, this has to be anterior, so this part of the white matter here and this part of the white matter here, this is the anterior column. And then because this is near the spinous process, this is the posterior column. So the whole thing is the white matter, but the white matter is made up of three areas: anterior column, lateral column, posterior column. Okay, the area in the middle that kind of looks like an H is called the gray matter. In real life it is tinted gray. I don't know why they didn't do that here, but it's gray. Same idea. The gray matter is divided into different parts, and we're going to call those parts the horns. Okay, so anterior horn would be this area here, because it's the pointing toward the anterior part of the vertebra. Lateral horn is off to the side, the sides of the H, and then the posterior horn would be the bottom of the H. So again, the whole thing's the gray matter, anterior horn, lateral horn, posterior horn. Okay, now we need to connect both sides of the H, so the bar that goes across is called the gray commissure. This is called the gray commissure. Then when you look inside the gray commissure, there's a little hole. We mentioned this part in lecture. That's called the central canal. Inside there we find cerebral spinal fluid. So the bar is the gray commissure. The little hole is the central canal. Now, when you look at the spinal cord, you can see it has grooves or depressions. And what these depressions do is they divide it into a right and left half. So the groove that's found at the anterior end is going to be called the anterior medial fissure. The groove that's found at the bottom half, we're going to call it the posterior medial fissure. So anterior medial fissure, anterior medial down the middle, posterior medial fissure. Okay, then we have what are called roots. Now I'm going to tilt this. See where they look like strings? There's a set of strings, they color them yellow on all models, on the top and also on the bottom or the posterior. These are the roots. Okay, so the yellow strings on top or anterior are called the anterior roots. If you want to call them ventral roots, you can do that too. And then when I go to the bottom, the yellow strings are called the posterior roots, or you can call them the dorsal roots. They look like yellow strings on all the models. They're all identical. All right, then we're going to see this big yellow bulge here. That's what we call the dorsal root ganglion. Now there's one on both sides. They didn't color this one yellow, so if I ask it on the test, I will ask you the bright yellow one. Okay, that's the dorsal root ganglion. Okay, then, coming off the ganglion is this little stub here. It's not this. It's this little stub here. That's the spinal nerve. This is the spinal nerve. They're very short. I always, in my mind to this day, think of something long and branching out of the vertebrae. They're not. They're little stubs here. Okay? That's the actual spinal nerve. This is something else that we don't need to worry about right now. Okay, that's the spinal nerve. Okay, then we have the meninges. Remember, they protect the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, if I ask you what these three layers are called, this one on the inside and this one, together they are the meninges, but we know that there are three. The outer one that I'm pointing to here is the dura mater, and then you see a little depression or groove. The inside one is the arachnoid mater, and then the one that touches the spinal cord is the pia mater. So they go in order. Dura mater outside, arachnoid mater on the inner side, and then the innermost one is the pia mater. And
One more
again,
time.
sure. Dura mater, and then you see a little depression. The inner part of that is the arachnoid mater, and then this one that touches the spinal cord is the pia mater. Again, I'll be here to help. You can bring them up and ask me. That's the most asked question, which is which. Okay, that's okay. So again, once you've seen one spinal cord, you've seen them all. Okay, the last model you need to look at today looks like some kind of, let's see, prehistoric bird or something. It's going to fly off, okay? What it is, it's actually the ventricles. Now, what you've got to get in your head again is that ventricles are spaces, so we really can't hold them. So they made a model of the space. So for example, this big piece here represents a space. Just to give you an idea, where you do see a hole or a space, that actually represents a solid object. So it's opposite. Okay, so what do we need to know? Okay, it kind of looks like bird wings on top. If you have a better description, fine. These two big pieces on top, those represent the lateral ventricles. The lateral ventricles. Okay, then I'm going to turn it sideways. And you find the hole, but remember it's not the hole. The area around the hole, that's the third ventricle. That's the third ventricle. Okay, then I'm going to skip cerebral aqueduct just for a minute. I'm going to go to the back of the ventricle model, and I think that this part kind of looks like a tail hanging off. That's the fourth ventricle. That's the fourth ventricle, which we haven't mentioned yet in class, but we will. Okay, then there's this long piece here. This long piece attaches the third and fourth ventricle, or you could just say it's above the fourth ventricle. That's the cerebral aqueduct. So fourth ventricle to me looks like a tail, and the part on top of it, that's called the cerebral aqueduct. All right, now this front table has one of each model. You share it. There's plenty of models.